Okay, so these sessions are recorded so that I can put them up on YouTube afterwards so people that miss the sessions can see them. Just so that you know, if you do have an issue with this, let me know and I'll have to deal with it accordingly. Okay, so let's just switch here. Is everything alright, Collins?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. No, I just saw you were typing. Alright. Welcome to Unity3D Concept to Completion. My name once again is Ernest Loveland. I'm a Technical Evangelist Intern at Microsoft South Africa. Just for reference and so that you know where to find information, you can find my social media and blog and contact me through ernestloveland.co.za and through the Facebook group, which is facebook.com/groups/MEA Game Champs. And the recordings in that will all be posted to the group. In terms of the schedule, we're now on the third session. This is a more community-based call where we look at designing games and that, with the goal of trying to design things that can be built by single people by the end of this program, which will be on March 19th effectively. So just a reminder, you're encouraged to ask questions, and you should have Unity3D installed at this point, preferably 4.3 plus because we use the new Unity 2D features. And after the session, you should start building the games you want to build. As part of this also, you should be sharing what you're building, especially when you need help to implement things or have problems that you don't know how to solve and so on, so that we can help you build the game you want to build through this tutorial series. So, as part of the recap, I was going to ask, has anyone been thinking of ideas yet? But there hasn't been a big turnout on the call. But more importantly, I wanted to touch on animations, and I wanted to know if there were any questions from last week. So I'm going to go back to look at the Unity 2D animations, and if there are questions, you can ask in the meantime. Okay, so I'm just going to I'm going to go to a new scene here quickly, and we're going to start from scratch with the animation. So the first thing that's important to note is, once again, we're using sprites because we're working in Unity 2D, and my laptop is freezing. There we go. And as part of the sprite system that we're using, we can do some very simple animations using Unity's built-in animation keyframe editor. So I'm going to do a very, very simple set of animations quickly, but before we do that, we need to add a component called an animator to our player, and this will have an animation controller, an avatar, and ask us to apply root motion. So we're just going to untick apply root motion for now. This is something that you'll need to do with animated things when you use the physics 2D. To get started with the animation, we then click record, and we can save our animations. So I'm going to make a new folder in my animations folder for this quickly, and I'm going to have a walk animation, and I'm going to do this very, very simply because we covered it previously. If I go through to my sprite, I can check all my different player sprites and I can drag them in, and it'll give me these sprites in my keyframe. So I'm just going to take this and spread these out in here so that we actually can see the animation. So that should be at 15. Actually, let's make it 10 seconds, 10 seconds, and just before the end, we now have a simple animation. So if I click play, you'll see our player does a little walk animation, and I'm going to add a second clip, and I'm just going to call it idle. The reason I'm doing this is just because I made a mistake last week, and it's important to get this done correctly. So this is also going to be a 30-second animation. So I've just dragged the sprite to where I want them on the keyframe timeline, and I'm ready to go. So you'll see here the controller has set itself to new sprite, and that is because that's the name of the object that we put it on. And the avatar that we choose, we're going to leave blank for now. Now we can add our animation changing component. I'm going to go animation changer, and I'm going to use C# as my script. So I've created and added it. I'm just going to open it and edit it quickly. Okay, line endings are all good. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use onGUI for this, and I'm going to keep this very simple. So I'm going to say if GUI.button, give myself 2 buttons so I can switch between the 2 animations. The one will be at 0, 0, and I'll call this walk. And the other one will be at 0, 100. And this will be to change to idle. So I'm not introducing anything new from last week. I'm just fixing up an issue that I had with code. So what we need to do with the animator now is we need to have our animation clip. So I'm going to quickly add in animation clip, walk animation, and that needs to be public so I can change it in the editor. And I'm going to do the same for the idle animation. Idle animation. Okay, this should be all good. The last thing we need to do is get our animator. So our animator is get component of type animator. I hope it is visible. I did forget to zoom in and I apologize. So animator dot play, and with this we can use a state name, and in this case it'll be walk animation dot name. We're going to do the same afterwards, but we're going to use the idle animation. Alright, so if I go back to my Unity editor now and look at this new sprite, I can add in my animation clips. So I named it walk and idle, and if I give it a run, I should have 2 buttons and it should start by walking, and I can switch to idle. So this is how you do the animation changes easily in Unity3D. So that was the one thing that I did the wrong way around last week. So just if you did watch last week and you're confused what the difference was, I used the animator instead of the animation component. Are there any questions at this point? Cool. Seems to be all good. So today what we actually want to focus on is designing a game. So I want to talk a little bit about the creative process and how you can find simple ideas for yourself that you can use for building up a game as part of this tutorial series. So the first point is you can be as creative as you want to. If you don't have any particularly good ideas of your own, think of mixing and matching existing games. Take Bomberman and Pac-Man for instance. Imagine building a Pac-Man game where you have to place bombs to open things up. All it does is adds a little different element and shows somebody something that they're familiar with, but in a way that they haven't seen it before. And there's lots of examples that you can look at. You might do crosses between things like Super Mario and Legend of Zelda, so on and so forth. So find some sets of mechanics that you enjoy and think of ways that you can join them together very simply. The second title here you see I've got is Match and Mix. And the reason I switched it around is because it's a very slightly different thing to understand. What you should do is focus on the difference between what your mechanics are. Would it be better to play the game in first person or third person? Should it be a top-down 2D game or a platformer? Should it be a role-playing game, story game, puzzle game, and so on? You need to understand what type of gameplay experience you want to give to the player before you start implementing mechanics. You might build something from the start and decide it should be a first-person role-playing game, then halfway through realize it would make more sense being a third-person puzzle game with the mechanics that you chose. So you need to just spend some time thinking of what would work best for your game idea and what would be easiest to implement in a way that'll be fun. And the last thing that I should say about being creative is find something new that you would like to play. So this doesn't necessarily mean that the game that you want to play, let's say the new Half-Life or the new Gears of War, is something you should aim to build. Even though it's something you want to play, it should be something you can build that you want to play. So try to think of games that are within your capabilities. And the second thing to think of is to minimize your idea. So take out anything that's unnecessary in terms of mechanics until you have the core mechanic that'll make your game the best it can be on its own. And then the last thing that you need to do is when you break it up into steps, you should focus on what you want. This means that once you've got a minimum idea, you should have a list of things that you can do in order, one by one, to get to the end product. And this will mean as you go through, you can show your own progress by ticking off things from the step-by-step plan that you've made for building your game. So that's the end of the presentation part. The idea now is to switch over to a more interactive session for this community call where you can discuss what kind of game ideas you would be interested in, and there's someone waiting in the lobby, and once you've worked out what you want to build, we can discuss what would be some good ideas for helping you build that. So anyone that has any ideas can unmute themselves and begin discussing. That's if anyone's here at all. Collins?
Yes.
So do you have any ideas for what to build?
Sorry?
Do you have any ideas for what to build before end of March?
Yeah, something like Temple Run-ish game.
Temple Run.
Yeah, a 3D game just to emulate what Temple Run does.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
quite a nice idea. Have you thought of any ideas of where you want to take it?
Not really, but I'd really like to build something of that sort.
Okay, so Temple Run is quite a simple game. If you take a look at it on a screen, you've got some pathway that your character moves on, and at certain points there's turns that you need to make, and you got a character at the bottom. And it's done by swiping left and right, and they've added in other things like jumping up and down and ducking. So have you thought of what the minimum amount of work you'd need to do to build a game like this would be?
Minimum amount of work?
Yeah, to prove that it's a fun game concept.
The interactivity or the design itself?
Well, the design itself. So if you took the design and built a game from the base component, what would that base component be?
I think something like the character itself.
The character itself, okay.
The character itself, because the idea is not to build exactly what Temple Run is, but a scenario that guys can relate to differently, but the interaction with the game should be more or less the same as Temple Run, because I think it's as simple as it can get is just swipe up, down, left, right. As in, that's the best interactivity, and then creating the character maybe like something like a Maasai running or a Zulu guy running, something like that.
Sounds like it could be pretty good. So essentially, what you're saying is the easiest thing to do would be to get your character controller
Yeah,
and have it moving basically continuously forward, and you'll
yeah,
be able to duck with it or jump with it and
yep,
turn left and right.
yeah, yeah,
Okay, that sounds good. Um, I do think, though, it would be a good idea to also consider a single mechanic that would adjust how the player has to move. So you've got movement in already, but
yeah,
perhaps adding in blocks that the player can't hit for
yeah.
your
Obstacles.
initial idea.
Yeah,
So
obstacles.
this
To a little bit complicate the pathway so that it's not just running straight. Maybe you're trying to grab something while you're running.
Yeah,
Uh,
sounds good. So if we
yeah,
just quickly hop back to Unity, we can take a look at this in a
cool.
new scene.
Yep.
Let me just save that previous scene. Alright. And I don't need animation for this. So I'm switching back out of Unity 2D. Unity's got a whole bunch of things that'll make it a lot easier for you to build what you just discussed. So let's just see here. What I need to do is I'm going to import a package and I'm going to import character controller. Okay, there's a lot of stuff in here and I'm just going to import it all and it'll add it to my project. So this will just take a moment. So if I go to project and I go to, should be under standard assets, character controller, you'll see there's a first person and a third person controller. So being a third person game, what I first want to do is add in a third person controller. And the third person controller will do certain things for you, like it'll give physics and all sorts of things like that. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go back to the controller and we're going to disable character controller and we're going to disable the third person controller. So if we give this a run, we should have a guy standing in the middle of our screen. So he won't be moving and he shouldn't be falling. So let's just unpause this. Let's stay in scene view. That won't let me switch to scene view. But the character you can see isn't moving at all. It's showing an animation, but that's just its default animation. So immediately, if we were to move this character around using script, the camera would follow it from behind, right? So that's already some of your work done for you. And you can change the model and you can change it to sprites or whatever you need. But I'm just showing that you can do certain things quite easily. Another thing that you can take a look at is primitives. So in 3D there's cubes. So if you want to build some obstacles to run around where you still have to turn left and right, you could throw these in. And it'll be quite easy for you to build up a temporary prototype to decide if it's a game idea you want to work on. Any further thoughts?
Um, I think let's work with that for now.
Okay, that sounds good. If you have further questions on implementing things or whatever, I can give you some tips and tricks still. Just be sure
Cool.
to ask.
Okay.
Shashank, do you have any ideas? Not yet. Okay. Jason?
I've been thinking of point and click kind of game.
Okay.
It's sort of like bits of ideas I haven't really unified into something fluid yet, but pretty much you just point and click in the environment and sort of your interactions with objects makes up the story of the game.
Okay. Have you played any point and click games that kind of stand out to you?
Recently I've played Gone Home,
Gone Home.
and
Okay.
and
And did they
Tales of Monkey Island.
Alright. Did they do anything specific in terms of how you do the point and click adventure or how they presented things to you as a player that you might think of doing yourself?
It, they One of the things I noticed in Gone Home was it was a linear story, but the linearity was created by the fact that you couldn't access certain parts of uh, the map
Okay.
before you've accessed other parts. So you had to actually complete certain things to get to the next part. So you were sort of locked into the correct sequence of events within the story they created.
And are you going to do it purely as a story, or are you going to add in puzzle elements like things like Pat Pat Saves the Zoo and those old children's games did?
Honestly, I don't really know, because
You don't know. Okay.
that sort of those sort of puzzles can get quite tricky to implement. See, I'm
That
not
is
sure if
also
I'm
true.
ready to actually try it.
Are we ever ready? Okay. Um, I do have to caution you if you're going to build a point and click adventure, if you do plan on finishing it. Point and click adventures, especially when they're story based, tend to take a lot of time and effort, and you're going to need a lot of art for it, which means you're going to need if you do it in 2D or 3D, you'll still need lots of assets and a significant storyline.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you're not intimidated by that, I'm sure you can pull it off in the next 2 months. So that'll be pretty awesome.
Yeah, I'll try. I don't know how far I'll get.
All right. And then Zanzibar, do you have any game ideas you want to discuss for this community call?
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. Okay, so for me, it's the first time I've been here, so I haven't really prepared something. But I was thinking on the idea of creating a space shooter game, like a top-down space shooter, which is mostly based on retro games like Xenon 2 Mega Blast.
Okay.
With a twist that it's pretty basic space shooter. I was thinking like a pretty basic space shooter with the added twist that as soon as you finish a level, you can customize your ship. So you
Okay.
can buy upgrades.
That sounds good.
And yeah, and basically the concept should be something like that. As long as you progress, you get to make your space layout as it fits you, and perhaps you can also sell items and buy and get money back and buy other items, so you can change the style of your ship as it suits you.
Okay. So I see there's two major concepts. So the one major thing is you've got your little ship and it's a space shooter. And then the other concept that you want to use to keep players hooked and interested is to allow ship customization. And that can be through different guns or different move perks or shields, etc., which can be traded and such.
Yes, exactly.
That sounds good. Are you going to do it in 2D or 3D?
I was primarily thinking 2D, as I also have a background in design. I was
Okay.
planning to do some sprites.
Alright. That sounds good. I think it's a very nice idea. Do you have any sort of ideas on how you're going to make this a unique experience that players will want to tell other players about? Just in terms of spreading it by word of mouth.
What do you mean? Like apart from the gameplay?
It doesn't necessarily have to be gameplay wise. It could be design wise. Are you going to just do sort of a generic space shooter, or are you going to be fighting, I don't know, space chickens or so on and so forth? What'll be
Okay.
the
Now
hook for a player?
yes. Now I get what you said. No, I haven't really thought of the concept of the style or something like that. I would like to do it like in a minimal style, like with
Okay.
basically using like geometric shapes
Okay.
and
Have you
solid
seen
color.
Geometry Wars?
Yes, I have.
You have. That's one of my favorite, I suppose. It's not very minimal. Uh, it's very visual design, but I like the idea of having minimal shooters. I think a lot of shooters, especially the big shmups at the moment, are all about big graphics, if you know
Yeah.
what I mean.
Yes, I definitely agree.
Uh,
I'm also for a more simplistic style.
I'm just trying to think if I can find this. Space Hack QCF Design. They did some really cool stuff. I just want to see if they have any pictures. Space Hack Dream Build Play 2008 entry. There we go. These guys did some really cool stuff. Um,
Okay.
Let me just find a snapshot in this video, if it'll load at all, which it doesn't seem to want to do. And let's try that again. Maybe there's some images that I can show. Oh, there we go. So this is what their game looked like. And the whole concept was basically in 2D, but
Yes. Yes. That was
they
some.
they did some really awesome things with vector art and that kind of thing for how the game looked, and I thought that was pretty nice.
Yes, I agree. This is quite a lot like what I had in mind.
Oh, that's quite nice. It's a very nice visual style, and I think it's appealing. They built it as a roguelike though, and it didn't really pick up much traction with players, I don't think, because they didn't understand why it was so difficult. But yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool. Well, I
Uh,
guess that covers this call for today. Um, I don't see a point in dragging it out, but if you want, you're welcome to stay on and discuss your ideas. And next week we'll be covering 3D and Unity. And I'll stop recording.